Jake Miller was just trying to keep his daughter safe. But when he jumped in front of a bullet meant for someone else's child, he started a chain reaction that would transform his entire neighborhood. Forever. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching, also like and subscribe for more stories. The alarm clock screamed at 5:30 a.m. Jake Miller rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the empty side of the bed. 3 years had passed since Sarah died in that car accident. But morning still felt like a punch to the gut. "Daddy, I can't find my school shoes." 7-year-old Emma's voice echoed from her bedroom. Jake smiled despite his exhaustion. Emma was his reason to keep going. Her laugh could light up the darkest days. Her innocent questions made him see the world differently. "Coming, princess," Jake called back. He found Emma sitting on her bed, her curly brown hair messy from sleep. She looked exactly like her mother. Same bright green eyes, same stubborn chin. "They're under your desk, sweetheart," Jake said, kneeling to tie her shoelaces. "Daddy, why do you look so tired?" Emma asked, touching his face with her small hand. Jake's heart broke a little. She was too young to carry his worries. "Just thinking about how lucky I am to have you," he said, kissing her forehead. The truth was harder. Jake worked 2 jobs, morning shift at the factory and evening shift at the gas station. The medical bills from Sarah's accident had destroyed their savings. The house payments were 3 months behind. But Emma didn't need to know that. Their neighborhood wasn't safe anymore. Drug dealers stood on corners. Gunshots echoed at night. But Jake couldn't afford to move. This small apartment was all they had. "Stay close to me," Jake whispered as they walked to Emma's school. A group of rough-looking men gathered near the playground. Their leather jackets had skull patches. Jake recognized them. The Devil's Riders Motorcycle Club. They controlled the drug trade in this area. Emma gripped Jake's hand tighter. "Daddy, those men look scary." "Don't stare, baby. Just keep walking." One of the bikers, a huge man with tattoos covering his arms, noticed them. His name was Bull, and he was known for his violent temper. "Hey, factory boy," Bull shouted. "You got something for me?" Jake's blood ran cold. Bull was talking about protection money. The bikers demanded payment from everyone in the neighborhood. "I don't have anything," Jake said quietly. Bull's eyes darkened. "Everyone pays, old man, especially people with pretty little daughters." The threat hung in the air like poison. Jake pulled Emma closer and walked faster. That evening, Jake stared at the bills spread across his kitchen table. Rent, $800 overdue. Electricity, final notice. Emma's school lunch account, empty. His factory paycheck was $400. The gas station paid $200 for part-time work. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. A knock at the door made his heart race. Through the window, he saw Bull's massive frame. "Daddy, who is that?" Emma peeked from her bedroom. "Stay in your room, princess. Everything's okay." Jake opened the door with shaking hands. "Time to pay up," Bull growled. $50 a week. That's cheap for keeping your daughter safe." "I don't have $50, Jake said honestly. Bull grabbed Jake's shirt. "Then find it. Bad things happen to people who don't pay. Real bad things." Jake thought about Emma sleeping peacefully in her bed. About her school play next week. About the dreams she shared every morning. "Please," Jake whispered. "I'll get the money. Just give me time." Bull laughed coldly. "1 week, or your pretty little girl might have an accident walking to school." Jake couldn't sleep that night. He walked through the apartment, checking the locks 3 times. Every sound made him jump. Emma found him sitting at the kitchen table at 3 a.m. "Daddy, why aren't you sleeping?" Jake lifted her onto his lap. She was getting so big, but she still fit perfectly in his arms. "Just thinking about stuff, sweetheart." "Are we in trouble?" she asked with the wisdom that children sometimes have. Jake's eyes filled with tears. "No, baby, Daddy will figure everything out, but how?" He couldn't borrow money. His credit was destroyed. He couldn't ask family, they were all gone. He couldn't call police. Bull had cops on his payroll. The next morning, Jake made a decision that would change everything. Jake found Bull at Mickey's bar, surrounded by his crew. The place smelled like cigarettes and stale beer. Loud music pounded from old speakers. "Look who came crawling back," Bull laughed. "You got my money?" "I have a proposition," Jake said, his voice stronger than he felt. Bull's eyebrows raised. "This should be good. What's a factory rat got to offer me? I know about the police raid planned for next Tuesday." This was a lie, but Jake was desperate. He'd heard rumors at work about increased police activity in the area. Bull's smile disappeared. What raid? My cousin works dispatch. 50 units are coming. They know about your warehouse on Elm Street. The bikers around Bull shifted nervously. The warehouse was their main drug storage facility. Why tell me this? Bull asked suspiciously. Because I want a deal. I warn you about police trouble. You leave my family alone. Bull studied Jake for a long moment. Interesting. But I don't trust you yet. You need to prove yourself first. There's a rival club trying to move into our territory, Bull explained. The Hells Angels think they can sell drugs on our streets. Tomorrow night we're sending them a message. Jake's stomach turned. What kind of message? The bloody kind. You're coming with us. I can't, I have a daughter. Bull grabbed Jake's throat. You want protection? You earn it. Tomorrow night, 10 p.m. behind the old factory. Don't disappoint me. Jake walked home in a daze. What had he gotten himself into? That evening, Emma noticed his mood. Daddy, you seem sad. Jake hugged her tight. I'm not sad when I'm with you, princess. Will you read me a story? Jake read her favorite book about a brave knight who saved a kingdom. As Emma fell asleep, Jake wondered if he could be brave enough to save his own small kingdom. This little apartment. This precious girl. Jake met Bull's crew behind the abandoned factory. 20 bikers, all armed, all angry. They were planning to attack a Hells Angels meeting at a warehouse across town. Remember, factory boy, Bull said, handing Jake a baseball bat. Tonight you become one of us or your daughter pays the price. Jake's hands shook as he took the weapon. He thought about Emma sleeping peacefully at home. Mrs. Rodriguez, their elderly neighbor, was watching her. Emma thought Daddy was working late at the gas station. They rode toward the warehouse district. Jake had never been on a motorcycle before. The wind was cold, and the engine's roar drowned out his racing thoughts. At the warehouse they saw motorcycles parked outside, Hells Angels bikes. 15 of them, 20 of us. Bull grinned. Easy fight. But as they approached, Jake realized something that changed everything. Through the warehouse window, Jake saw something that made his blood freeze. A small girl, maybe 8 years old, sat in the corner. She was crying, her clothes dirty, her face scared. Bull, there's a kid in there, Jake whispered urgently. Bull shrugged. Collateral damage. Sometimes kids get hurt. That's life. Jake's world stopped spinning. That little girl could be Emma. Someone's daughter was about to get caught in a war she didn't understand. We can't do this with a child inside. Bull's eyes turned dangerous. You getting soft, factory boy? Maybe your daughter needs to learn what happens to cowards. Jake realized the horrible truth. Bull would never leave his family alone. Men like this didn't keep promises. They took and took until nothing was left. But Jake also realized something else. For the first time in 3 years, he wasn't afraid. The Hells Angels members were drinking, laughing, unaware of the danger outside. The little girl sat alone, forgotten in the corner. Bull's crew spread out, surrounding the warehouse. Jake was positioned near the back door. On my signal, Bull whispered into his radio. Jake looked at that scared little girl through the window. He saw Emma's face. He saw Sarah's eyes. He saw every innocent person who ever needed someone to stand up for them. Now, Bull screamed. The Devil's Riders burst through doors and windows. Gunshots exploded. Men shouted. Glass shattered. But Jake didn't attack the Hells Angels. Instead, he ran toward the little girl. Get down, Jake yelled, throwing himself over the child as bullets flew overhead. A massive Hells Angels member named Razor was protecting the girl. His daughter, Jake realized. Razor was bleeding from his arm, trying to shield her with his body. Please, Razor gasped. Don't hurt her. She's just a kid. Jake looked into Razor's eyes and saw himself, a father desperate to protect his child. I'm not here to hurt anyone, Jake said. I'm getting you both out of here. More gunshots. Bull's voice roared over the chaos. Where's my factory boy? Kill everyone! Jake helped Razor to his feet. Can you walk? I think so. But they'll kill us if we run. Not if I stop them first. Jake stood up in the middle of the gunfight. Bullets flew past his head. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it over the shooting. Bull. Stop! Jake screamed. The shooting paused for a moment. Both sides stared at him. Let them go, Jake said. The father and daughter. They're not part of this war. Bull laughed coldly. You're protecting the enemy? I knew you were weak. Bull raised his gun toward Jake. Time slowed down. Jake thought about Emma waiting at home. About the bedtime story they'd never have if he died tonight. About her first day of school, her first broken heart, her wedding day, all the moments he'd miss. But he also thought about this scared little girl who needed someone to be brave. Sarah's voice whispered in his memory. The world needs more people who choose love over fear, Jake. Didn't move. Bull pulled the trigger. The bullet flew through the air. Jake closed his eyes and thought about Emma's laugh, but the bullet didn't hit Jake Razor. The Hells Angels member dove forward. The bullet meant for Jake tore through Razor's chest instead. Daddy, the little girl screamed. Razor collapsed, blood spreading across his shirt. With his last breath, he looked at Jake. Thank you, Razor whispered. Take care of Sophie. Jake knelt beside the dying man, holding his hand. I will. I promise. Sophie, Razor's daughter, cried over her father's body. Jake pulled her close, his own tears falling. The warehouse fell silent. Even Bull's hardened crew seemed shocked by what happened. You killed him, Sophie sobbed. You killed my daddy. No, sweetheart, Jake said gently. Your daddy died protecting me. He was a hero. Jake stood up, still holding Sophie. He looked at Bull with new eyes, not fear, but disgust. This ends now, Jake said quietly. Bull laughed. What's a dead man going to do about it? But something had changed in Jake. The other Hells Angels members stepped forward, surrounding Bull's crew. Their leader, Razor, was dead, killed by these invaders. You just started a war you can't win, one of the angels said. Bull suddenly realized his mistake. He was outnumbered in enemy territory. His surprise attack had failed. We're leaving, Bull said, backing toward the door. No, Jake said. You're staying. The police are already on their way. It wasn't true, but Jake's voice carried such conviction that everyone believed him. Bull's crew panicked. They ran for their motorcycles, leaving Bull behind. Bull pointed his gun at Jake again. You destroyed everything. But before Bull could shoot, Sophie did something unexpected. The 8-year-old girl walked up to the massive biker. My daddy was a good man, she said, tears streaming down her face. He helped people. He wasn't perfect, but he tried to be better. You're just angry and mean. Bull stared at this tiny girl who showed more courage than grown men. You killed my daddy for nothing, Sophie continued. But I won't let you hurt anyone else. She hugged Jake's leg. This man saved me. That makes him family. The remaining Hells Angels members surrounded Bull. Their code was simple. You kill one of theirs, you pay the price. But Jake did something that surprised everyone. Let him go, Jake said. Everyone stared at him in shock. He killed Razor, one of the angels said. He has to pay. Jake knelt down to Sophie's level. What do you think your daddy would want? More violence? More death? Sophie wiped her eyes. Daddy always said fighting just makes more fighting. Jake stood up and looked at Bull. You have a choice. Keep living this life hurting innocent people until someone kills you. Or walk away. Find something better. Bull's hand shook as he held the gun. They'll never let me leave. The crew, the business, I'm in too deep. Everyone can change, Jake said. I was a coward 2 hours ago. Now look at me. Bull stared at Jake for a long moment. Then slowly he lowered his weapon. This isn't over, Bull said. Yes, it is, Jake replied. For all of us. By morning, the story had spread through the entire neighborhood. A single father stood up to the Devil's Riders. A Hells Angels member died protecting a stranger. A little girl showed more courage than grown men. The local news picked up the story. Single dad took a bullet for a Hells Angels member. Hours later, 120 bikers hunted his shooter. But the real story was more complex than any headline could capture. Jake sat in the hospital waiting room with Sophie. The little girl hadn't left his side since her father died. Social services was trying to find her relatives, but Sophie clung to Jake like he was her lifeline. Will you be my daddy now? She asked innocently. Jake's heart broke. I'm not your daddy, sweetheart, but I'll take care of you until we find your family. Emma burst through the hospital doors with Mrs. Rodriguez. Jake had called his neighbor to explain what happened. Daddy! Emma ran into his arms. Jake held his daughter tight, breathing in her familiar scent. I'm okay, princess. Everything's okay. Emma noticed Sophie sitting alone. With the natural kindness of children, Emma walked over and sat beside her. Hi, I'm Emma. Do you want to be friends? Sophie nodded shyly. Word spread quickly through the Hells Angels community. Razor was remembered as a member trying to go straight. a single father working to give his daughter a better life, just like Jake. The Angels' national president, a man called Thunder, arrived from out of state. He was a legend, older, wiser, scarred by decades of hard living but trying to steer his club toward legitimate business. Thunder found Jake at the diner where he was having breakfast with both girls. "You Jake Miller?" Thunder asked. Jake tensed, but Emma and Sophie kept eating their pancakes, unaware of the danger. "Yeah." Thunder sat down across from them. The big man looked at Sophie, his eyes soft with grief. "Razor was my nephew," Thunder said quietly. "I heard what you did." Jake waited for threats, violence, revenge. Instead, Thunder held out his hand. "Thank you." Jake shook the hand, confused. "You gave him a chance to die with honor," Thunder explained. "In our world, that means everything." "The Devil's Riders have been pushing drugs in this neighborhood for years," Thunder said. "Razor was working with police to stop them. That's why he was at the warehouse, gathering evidence." Jake's mind reeled. He was undercover, trying to clean up his life for Sophie. But Bull found out. Last night was supposed to be Razor's execution. Thunder looked at both little girls, who were now sharing crayons to color their placemats. "You saved my nephew's mission, even if you couldn't save his life." Over the next hour, Thunder explained the real situation. The Hells Angels were trying to go legitimate, opening legal businesses, ending drug operations. The Devil's Riders were the old guard, refusing to change. "We need good men like you," Thunder said. "Not to join the club, but to help us clean up these neighborhoods." Jake thought about his morning walks with Emma, seeing drug dealers on every corner. About children like Sophie caught in wars they didn't start. "What did you have in mind?" Thunder's plan was simple but dangerous. The Hells Angels would provide information about Devil's Riders operations. Jake would pass it to police through proper channels. His cousin in dispatch story would become reality when Thunder introduced him to Detective Maria Santos, an undercover officer who'd been trying to penetrate the drug trade. "Why trust me?" Jake asked. "Because you risked everything for a stranger's child," Thunder replied. "That tells me who you really are." The plan worked better than anyone expected. Within 2 weeks, police raids shut down 3 major drug operations. Bull and his crew were arrested. The neighborhood started feeling safer. But the real change was in Jake himself. Sophie's relatives were never found. Her mother had died years ago, and Razor had no living family except Thunder. Social services wanted to put her in foster care, but Jake applied to be her guardian. The process was complicated. Jake was a single father with money problems, but Thunder hired a lawyer. Detective Santos provided character references, and the community rallied around Jake's application. "Why do you want to adopt her?" the social worker asked during the interview. Jake looked at Sophie and Emma playing together in the corner of the office. They'd become inseparable. 2 little girls who'd found each other in the middle of chaos. "Because she needs someone to love her," Jake said simply, "and because Emma needs a sister." "Can you support 2 children?" Jake smiled. "Thunder offered me a job managing his new auto repair shop. Detective Santos recommended me for a community outreach position with the police. I'll make it work." 3 months later, the adoption was finalized. A year later, Jake met someone unexpected. Detective Maria Santos had become a friend during the investigation. She visited often to check on the girls. She helped with homework. She taught them self-defense. One evening after the girls were asleep, Maria and Jake sat on the porch talking about the future. "You know," Maria said, "I never thought about having kids. What changed?" "Meeting Emma and Sophie. Seeing how you love them. It made me want to be part of something like that." Jake looked at this strong, beautiful woman who'd helped rebuild their lives. "Want to try?" he asked. They were married the following spring. Emma and Sophie were flower girls. Thunder walked Sophie down the aisle to give her away to Jake. The entire Hells Angels chapter attended, along with police officers, factory workers, and neighbors. Bull, serving life in prison for murder and drug trafficking, watched the wedding on the news from his cell. The man he'd tried to destroy had become a community hero. 5 years after that night in the warehouse, Jake stood in the same spot where Razor died. But now it was a community center, the Razor Rodriguez Memorial Youth Center. Thunder had donated money. The city provided land. Jake managed the daily operations. Emma, now 12, was teaching younger kids to read. Sophie, 13, was running a support group for children who'd lost parents to violence. "Daddy," Sophie called. She still called him Daddy. though they both remembered her biological father. Mrs. Santos says the new playground equipment arrived. Maria was pregnant with their first child together, a boy they'd decided to name Razor. Jake watched his daughters because that's what they were now, both of them, helping other kids. He thought about that scared man who'd tried to make a deal with Bull 6 years ago, that Jake Miller was gone. In his place stood a man who'd learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose love over fear. One afternoon, a young woman walked into the community center. She was maybe 25, with tired eyes and a baby on her hip. "Excuse me," she said to Jake. "Are you Jake Miller?" "Yes, how can I help you?" "My name is Lisa. My brother was Bull Morrison." Jake's blood ran cold. Bull had died in prison 2 years ago, stabbed by a rival gang member. "I'm sorry for your loss," Jake said carefully. Lisa laughed bitterly. "Don't be. Bull was a monster. But before he died, he wrote me a letter. About you." She handed Jake a folded piece of paper. The letter was simple. "Lisa, I spent my whole life hurting people. But there was this guy, Jake Miller. He showed me mercy when I didn't deserve it. He tried to save me from myself. I was too proud to listen. Find him, tell him thank you. Tell him he was right. Everyone can change. I just ran out of time." Bull Jake's eyes filled with tears. "He talked about you in every letter after that night," Lisa continued. "Said you made him realize he'd wasted his whole life being angry. He started reading books in prison, got his GED, was teaching other inmates to read before he died." Lisa shifted her baby to her other hip. "I named my son after him, William. But I want him to grow up knowing good men exist too. Men like you. What can I do for you, Lisa? I want to volunteer here. I want to help kids like my brother used to be, before the anger took over. Maybe I can save someone Bull couldn't." That evening, Jake sat with his family around the dinner table. Emma was 17 now, preparing for college. Sophie was 18, working at the community center while finishing high school. Maria was nursing baby Razor. Their second child, a daughter named Sarah, was coloring in her high chair. "Dad," Emma said, "I've decided what I want to study in college." "What's that, princess?" "Social work. I want to help families like ours." Sophie nodded. "I want to be a police officer like Mom. Stop bad guys before they hurt kids." Jake looked around the table at his beautiful, growing family, at these strong young women who'd learned compassion from tragedy. "I'm proud of you both," he said. Later, after everyone was asleep, Jake walked outside. The neighborhood was quiet now. Kids playing in yards, families sitting on porches, old people walking safely in the evening. He thought about that night 6 years ago when everything changed. About Razor, who died protecting a stranger. About Bull, who found redemption too late. About Thunder, who chose change over tradition. About Maria, who saw potential in a scared single father. Most of all, he thought about 2 little girls who'd taught him the meaning of courage. A motorcycle rumbled down the street. Jake tensed for a moment. Old habits died hard. But it was just Thunder, stopping by for his weekly dinner with the family. "How's retirement treating you?" Jake asked as the older man dismounted. Thunder had stepped down as club president, leaving the organization in the hands of younger members committed to legitimate business. "Good," Thunder said. "Quiet, though I miss the excitement sometimes." "No, you don't," Jake laughed. Thunder smiled. "No, I don't. This is better." They stood in comfortable silence. 2 men who'd found peace after lives of chaos. "You know," Thunder said, "Razor would be proud of what you've built here." Jake nodded. "I hope so. I know so. He didn't die for nothing." "Jake, look around you." Jake looked at the safe streets, the community center, the families thriving where once there'd been only fear. "None of us did," Jake replied. 10 years after that night, Jake received a letter from a stranger. "Mr. Miller, you don't know me, but my name is Marcus. I grew up in your neighborhood. My mom used to send me to your community center after school. You probably don't remember me. I was just one of hundreds of kids who came through there, but I remember you. I remember how you talked to everyone like they mattered. How you never gave up on anyone. How you showed us that being strong didn't mean hurting people. I'm a teacher now. I work in a tough neighborhood, trying to do for other kids what you did for me. When things get hard, I ask myself, what would Jake Miller do? I wanted you to know that the man who took a bullet for a stranger's child, he changed more lives than he'll ever know. Thank you for showing us how to be brave." Marcus Thompson. Jake folded the letter carefully and put it in his desk drawer with dozens of others like it. That evening, at the dinner table surrounded by his family, Jake realized something profound. He'd started that night trying to save his daughter from danger. Instead, he'd saved himself from fear, and in doing so, he'd helped save everyone around him. Emma, now a social worker helping at-risk families, squeezed his hand. "What are you thinking about, Dad?" Sophie, a police officer working community relations, smiled at her father's thoughtful expression. Maria, still detective but now focused on community policing, recognized the look in her husband's eyes. "Just grateful," Jake said, looking around at his beautiful family. "For all of it. The good and the bad, because it brought us here." Baby Razor babbled happily from his high chair. 5-year-old Sarah showed off the picture she'd drawn, a family holding hands under a rainbow. Outside, the neighborhood was alive with the sound of children playing, families laughing, life being lived without fear. Jake Miller, the single dad who'd once been too scared to stand up to a bully, had become the man who taught an entire community the meaning of courage. And it had all started with a simple choice: to protect someone else's child as fiercely as he protected his own. Sometimes, that's all it takes to change the world. One act of love, one moment of bravery, one person willing to choose hope over fear. The rest, as they say, is just the beautiful consequence of that choice.